Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today is patch day. Okay, so today, yes, it's patch day. We have finally got to see Twilight Assault go into the game. This is the update that seeks to reinvigorate and redesign partly Twilight Arbor, one of the existing dungeons in the game that has now come to be a bigger part of the living story. The idea here is that Scarlett has built a secret base within Twilight Arbor, and the Lion Guard, who are now seeking redemption or vengeance, I guess would be a better word for it, for the attack on one of their counselors, are hoping to kick her out and just wreck her base straight away. So this is in reference to the assassination of one of the counselors in Lion's Arch, Theo Ashford, which was really important, and it was totally off screen when it happened, which still upsets me. But I'm really happy that ArenaNet is sort of acknowledging that this happened again, and that's a really solid reason, I feel, a really good motivation for the Lion Guard to come in. At the same time, Gw2 has turned her attention on Scarlett too, because they have a little bit of history. Gw2 knew Scarlett before all of this crazy evil stuff started happening with her. Gw2 was never particularly fond of her. She says this in the new... There's going to be spoilers for the new patch in this video, guys. This is what I'm talking about. But now Scarlett is like beckoning to Gw2 and asking Gw2 to come basically into what is quite obviously a trap, right? They don't want to be friends. Gw2 certainly doesn't like Scarlett. So Gw2, upon being contacted by Scarlett in this way, decides that instead of meeting Scarlett head on, she's gonna try and infiltrate the base and kill her and end her crazy villainous activities. So we actually have two different groups, or two different factions, I guess, here, that both really want to get into Twilight Arbor. And the way ArenaNet structured the dungeon is they have replaced one of the paths in Twilight Arbor. I'm going to talk about that in particular in just a section. They have replaced Forward Up with an entirely new path where you are allied with Gw2 to infiltrate the base. And the idea here is the Lion Guard, Gw2, and you, the player characters, all meet up and say, how do we best deal with this? Gw2 is very sneaky, so you team up with Gw2 to basically get into the base and try and clear out the big threats, and hopefully Scarlett herself. And once that's out of the way, the Lion Guard can bring in their main forces to absolutely wreck and level the place. So it's a really interesting dungeon path because it's a path of an explorable mode dungeon that feels like you have the main path and then it ends with the conclusion of the Gw2 bit, and then all the Lion Guard come in, and then it feels like you're like in an explorable section of an explorable path of a story mode dungeon. It's really cool. It's bizarre, but I quite enjoy it. So you have this very linear progression through the dungeon, and then it ends when the Lion Guard come in. They want to destroy everything, and you can leave right then if you wish. You've already got most of the full rewards aside from achievements and stuff. You can leave if you wish, or you can stay about and help them and complete these bonus objectives, like clearing out lots of Aether Blades while saving the lives of all of the Lion Guard, throwing EMP grenades at Scarlett and the Aether Blades airships, and opening these hidden chests which you get from this new keys system. It's pretty cool. I will say that sort of last bit where you're with the Lion Guard ends very quickly, and it's all incredibly easy. I don't know whether ArenaNet were going for sort of a 50-50 thing. I'm sure they weren't. But it's almost so short that I feel like it's a bit of a redundant feature. It's a little bit weird, but I really enjoy it, and it was a nice way to sort of explore the dungeon a little bit more, and really see that they've added a lot of new areas. The core path itself, where you're with Gw2, is just difficult enough to feel maybe a little bit more difficult than most explorable dungeons. I've only ran through it the once. I ran through it and then I wanted to record this video, so I don't really have a base for comparison. I don't know whether our group was particularly good or particularly bad. It felt like sometimes we did really well and other times we did quite poorly. But in general, I would say this is not the super hardcore 5-man content I personally have been looking for. This is exactly the same as the Molten Facility and the Aether Blade Hideout, in that it's kind of challenging. It's just challenging enough for what I consider regular level 80 content should be. It is challenging. It's not so challenging it's really frustrating to lose all the time, and it is filled with lots of interesting encounters with dynamic methods and mechanics to actually defeating bosses and traversing through rooms as you go. Like, the gameplay in general is far superior to anything we've seen in any regular dungeons. There's these crazy rooms where the whole floor is going to be getting electrified, and you have to get all 5 party members into specific areas of the room so that you can spawn an enemy who then you have to pull over to a door and then kill at the right moment. There's a lot of really intricate, cool stuff that I feel like is really well designed, because yeah, you can make very complicated stuff, but I just jumped in. I did this with the LFG system. Literally, we just made a post, got thrown in with 5 random people, or 3 random people, because I was with one friend, and we went in. And yes, these mechanics were kind of complicated as we was going through, but they weren't so complicated. You absolutely needed some kind of VoIP application like TeamSpeak or Vent. You didn't need to go that extra mile. It was just enough that I feel like if you were kind of attentive, there were quite a few moments, I got to say, where the people I was running with seemed like they didn't really pick up on little things very quickly. But, you know, if people were just attentive enough and really focused on the game, they could pick up on the mechanics as they came, and it wasn't as frustrating as it could have been, right? This was definitely something you can pug through as long as you have that focus and as long as everyone, you know, is, in terms of gear, well equipped. And I feel like that's a nice balance to hit for the game, and I feel like that's something a lot of players want from the game right now. But it is not that niche type of content that I'm still really looking for in terms of 5-man difficulty. I am really compelled and excited by the idea of ArenaNet adding content that just barely anyone can do. Remember when they added Leandri, the Undying, this fight in the Queen's Gauntlet? They said that they weren't expecting many people to complete that, you know, less than, what was it, 12%, I think they said, or something, of their testers had actually managed to get through this content, and they were happy with that. They didn't want everyone to get through it, kind of thing. And I would love to see dungeons that have that same philosophy, but I can also understand, as I say, why they don't do that for the main dungeons in the game, because, you know, they're meant to be a significant part of the end game. And speaking of which, I don't actually think this dungeon path is going to be that replayable. I've done it once. I've looked through my achievements. There are several new achievements added to the game. They're all pretty interesting, quirky ways, different things you can do, and challenges you can try and meet as you're going through the dungeon, which I believe is absolutely the best way to do the achievements. But regardless, I've gone through it once. I've got as many achievements as I could on the first time, and I'm looking at it and thinking, right, and one more replay of this path, I can probably get all my achieves. And then what? Well, nothing, really. I don't really feel like I'm going to want to redo it after that one time through. And that's an interesting thought to me, because everyone's always complained that the Molten Facility and the Aetherblade hideout were only temporary and that they all wanted them permanent. But I think even with those, I'd be in the same position. I would only run through them twice, 3 times, 5 times max, and then probably never play them again. But the point here, why this should be permanent, which this dungeon now is, thankfully, the reason why this should be permanent is because it allows those players who cannot play for the next fortnight, the next month, the next 2 months even, they can actually come back and still enjoy this, right, regardless of what's going on with the living story. That's an interesting point too to me, that a year down the road, is Scarlett still going to be our main villain? And regardless of whether that's an exciting idea to you, I think it's quite unlikely. I'm sure that we will eventually have dealt with Scarlett. It would be kind of annoying if we go that long without having to deal with her. But my point is, a year down the road, how is this dungeon path still... Are they happy to just leave it in there anyway? And you sort of have to suspend disbelief and be like, oh, I'm playing this dungeon path, but it's set in the past. You know, sort of like when you replay through a story mode. Who knows? And at that point, does anything replace it? Because this new path is already replacing something. This is something I've seen some people talking about on the forums, saying they're not happy with it. I'm fine with it. I was actually expecting a whole new, like a 4th path to Twilight Arbor. The devs didn't do that. They decided to just nuke one of the existing paths, Forward Up. Forward Up wasn't the most ran Twilight Arbor path, mostly because it was the longest one. It did have some weird balance issues, but it also had some cool areas too. There was one section of that Forward Up path where you had to interact with this object to stealth yourself, and then sneak past a load of angry bees, which would instantly kill you and were invulnerable to damage if they saw you. But as you were going through stealth, you'd have to avoid all these water fountains, which would wash the stealth off of you, and then the bees would see you and attack you. You know, there were some cool little things there, and now that's just been obliterated and gone from the game. I don't really mind too much, though. As I say, it might just be because I'm already sort of done with that dungeon. I've got all of that dungeon armor that I'd ever want. But it is still interesting. There is this point people keep coming back to. Please stop revamping content, just give us new content. And this is still in a way them revamping it right there. They're taking one thing out to replace it with another thing, and maybe that just taps back into, you know, this really strong desire they have at ArenaNet to not spread players out too much. If you just keep adding more and more and more features and game types and paths and stuff, people are getting spread thinner and thinner and thinner, and they think that's a dangerous thing to do. Now, let's talk about the story. Okay, so we go in with Keith. I think they do a lot of things very, very well with Keith here. Keith is, once again, an NPC that's with us, but due to limitations in the game's AI or the kind of skills they can do, or, you know, simple balance issues, this NPC that is with us through this path, as you frequently do have NPCs with you through content in Guild Wars 2, it's not really useful. She's not necessarily useful, right? But ArenaNet have kind of embraced that, and the way they've avoided people feeling annoyed like they're just carrying Keith dead weight that doesn't do anything, just keeps dying and have to get rezzed. They actually make her, she's sort of going through the path with you, but she is being sneaky and stealthy, and she is sort of always just off the limits of the path you're in. She's always speaking to you, she's always letting you know what she's seeing and how to progress further through the facility, and you feel like she's by your side, but she's always just off camera. And I think that was really smart, because it cuts away that annoyance a lot of players feel when the NPC they're with just keeps dying and feels useless. Keith avoids that completely, and even better, they actually add in one line of dialogue that I think is very, very, very smart, and is clearly in a response to all this hatred for Traherne and other useless NPCs, and NPCs in particular that take credits from you. You know, you're the player, that you do all this stuff, and this NPC just happens to be with you, and then they get all the credit and they never appreciate you. Keith has one specific line in this dungeon where she says to you, "Hey, thanks. I know that you're really struggling here, and I know that it must be difficult. It's not going over my head. Thank you very much. This is a real help." You know, and just the way she says it, that's obviously me paraphrasing. The way she says it is like bam, it's right bang on point, and I can just tell straight away. So many players will be like, "Yeah, Keith, you're all right. Thank you for actually appreciating what I'm doing here." And I love that Aina actually decided to put that in. I feel like it's such an arbitrary thing that they feel like they must have to add, but they really do, because I think people will start to appreciate Keith a lot more. She is, I've got to say, after I've played through this dungeon, I've come to appreciate Keith a lot more. Mainly for, as a character, mainly for one big reason, okay? We don't find Scarlett in the facility. There are loads of holograms of Scarlett, though. There is a lot of suggestions from the Aether Blades that are in the base, who are working with Scarlett, that these are just pre-recorded holograms. They're just pre-recorded, and Scarlett doesn't have anything to do with what they're currently saying. But then, they also react specifically to the players and Keith as you go through, which is really interesting to me. How is she able to do that? And Keith even asks, are you really here? What's going on? How you keep responding to me, but are you even here? Is this all pre-recorded? And this is a really subtle and nice thing they did here, because I'm pretty sure it's referencing the fact that Scarlett has like seen so much of the universe and time itself, right? There's this whole idea that Scarlett knows everything that's kind of going on and what's going to happen because she's seen through the mists and blah blah blah. She has all of these phenomenal predictions and things now, and I think this is what the idea is, that Scarlett has such a vast knowledge of what is currently happening and what will happen, that she has pre-recorded all of these holograms, but she already knows Keith's going to sneak in. Keith's being all sneaky and trying to hide and stuff, but Scarlett knew before she even entered that Keith had been baited into her trap. So it's like these holograms are reacting to you on the fly, but they're not. Scarlett just set them up because she knew that this was going to happen and people were going to interact with them at that time, and that's it. And that's what I think is going on there. It's really, really cool. The other thing that's very cool is Keith has an interaction with one of the Scarlett holograms where, first of all, Scarlett just comes up with this great stuff about Fowlane. She starts goading Keith and saying that she knows more about Keith than even Fowlane does. Just the fact that Fowlane was mentioned in this path, when Fowlane has no role to play really at all in this bit of the story necessarily, just except for the fact that she was mentioned here, I really enjoy. But Scarlett says, I know more about you, Keith, than even Fowlane does. And then she starts teasing her and saying, "Oh, does that make us girlfriends? Should I start calling you Dearheart?" Dearheart being the term, the pet name, I guess, that Fowlane always used to give to Keith. And Fowlane herself, too, in story mode of Twilight Arbor, if you play through that, you will see Fowlane is still calling Keith Dearheart, and Keith hates that name now, and it's something that really gets under her skin. And now we even have Scarlett saying, "Oh, do I call you Dearheart?" Even better than that, though, after Scarlett says, "I know everything there is to know about you, Keith," she mentions something about Keith's past. She says, "I know what you did, Keith. You're bad," basically. And this is really interesting to me. There's some deficit in my knowledge about Guild Wars 2 lore right now, because I remember ages ago, maybe it was around launch, maybe it was after I read one of the books, I remember there was something somewhere that ArenaNet had set up, that there was some mystery about Keith's past, that Keith had done something bad. And like, I have no citation for that. I cannot remember. But as soon as Scarlett mentioned this in the current living story, something just clicked in my mind, and I thought, hang on, I've heard something like that before. Because I remember, I'm pretty sure I used to be active on Guild Wars 2 Guru when it was originally like brought to my attention that there might be something to do with Keith's past, because I feel like I remember typing something out on that forum saying, "Oh, I wonder what this is." Somewhere ArenaNet have mentioned that there's some dark spot in Keith's history, and then just like I completely forgot about it. ArenaNet seemed to have dropped it, but here we're seeing a reference to it. And I could be wrong about that. That could just be my memories playing tricks on me. But regardless, they have established that there is this thing, that something happened with Keith that made her bad. And actually, if you think about Keith as a character, there's a lot of mysteries to do with her. She, yes, she rejected Fowlane when Fowlane turned to Nightmare. Okay, we still don't really know the specific circumstances in which Fowlane turned to Nightmare. And perhaps this dark spot in Keith's history has something to do with that. There's also something very peculiar. I don't know whether ArenaNet just sort of overlooked it or it was meant to be something more serious. But when you make a new Sylvari character, who's the first person you see? You see a vision of Keith. Keith is guiding you through the dream? How does that happen? No Sylvari necessarily have that power as far as I remember. And Keith's just there, quite blasé, saying, oh, look, I'll show you how to get through. And it's just never really been explained. Does this maybe have some relation? Or is that just something quite arbitrary, again, that Keith can do and maybe other Sylvari can do? And again, it's just another gap in my knowledge. But I find that interesting. Very interesting that there is this dark spot in Keith's past, and Scarlett knows it too, right? Scarlett baited Keith to come into the dungeon. I think Scarlett always knew that her plan was going to succeed, and she got to have this interaction with Keith. Keith never managed to kill her. Keith is now really pissed with Scarlett, by the way. But there has been no conclusion there just yet. I think maybe next thing on Scarlett's plans could have something to do with Fowlane. But aside from that one reference to Fowlane during the dungeon, there is no mention of what she is currently doing, even though we're in her old abode, essentially. There is no mention whatsoever. Beyond that, there's very little else going on with Keith. As I say, the dungeon ends with the Lion Guard coming in. You get to throw EMP grenades at airships. You get to blow the whole place up. Overall, I had a lot of fun playing it. I cannot say it's going to be the most replayable thing. I feel like this 2 weeks is probably going to be you know, and there's quite a few people that are saying this at the moment. If you feel like there's way too much living story content coming out because it's every 2 weeks, you'll probably enjoy this 2 weeks, because frankly I feel like maybe 1-2 runs of this dungeon and I'm pretty much content with it. I was hoping a lot more things would come from this update, like the skill updates, which just did not happen, sadly. Though there was a bit of rebalancing for Gw2 the Sunless, namely, if you are staying behind to take out fingers during the burn phase, then you will still get credit for the batteries, which is awesome. They have rebalanced the drops from that chest, namely the drop rate of the Sunless weapons, which was ridiculously low. I've killed that boss quite a few times, never had a Sunless weapon, has been increased. I feel like that's pretty much a win-win situation. A lot of the times, if you're increasing drop rates, then you're actually devaluing the price of that stuff on the trading post, right? Because it's dropping more frequently. So it doesn't actually add value. Raising the drop rate doesn't actually add more incentive to players, because it just drops the price on the trading post accordingly, and then there's less incentive. But the Sunless weapons, they're account bound anyway, right? So I feel like that's a good move, making them a higher drop rate. Obviously, they don't want to make it too high to devalue Ascended Crafting, of course, but that will hopefully keep people playing to Gw2 and keeping them interested. There were some quality of life things too, like now you can kick people out of high-lec turrets if they've just been wasteful and standing about for ages. No massive overhauls to the overflow system, of course. I think that if they ever even plan to do that, that would take a long time to even implement. That seems like that's going to be a big hard-coded issue for them if they want to work on it. And then there were some other cool little things. There's new hairstyles which you can preview on their website. None of them will look particularly interesting to me, and you'd have to make a new character or use a makeover kit if you wanted to actually use them. Maybe I'll swap to it eventually. And a lot of other small changes for PvP, like they've renamed some of the amulets, the rune descriptions are more reflective of what they actually do now, and they've just added quality of life improvements to most of the maps. That's pretty much it, guys. That's the patch in a nutshell. I will leave you with one final thing. As ever, when one of these updates comes out, ArenaNet gives us a single image about the next patch, and the image this time looks like a Son of Svanir shaman to me, with like a skull face paint on him of some kind, and he's standing with his arms up like, come at me, bro. So we'll see what happens with that. I'll keep you up to date. There is a short story on the website too, which I'll be reading out soon enough. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Let me know what you think about the patch, and I will see you next time. Have a good one.